The next day, Siyu visited Jaime. She wanted to know why Jaime owned 5% of the shares in R. According to her investigation, Jaime had held them for the past 10 years. Jaime understood that Siyu had come to ask for her support, and she was considering it, but Jaime wanted to know more. "Are you my biological mother?" she asked. Jaime was stunned. She didn't know what to say. Ihu had already suspected this. She had previously been told that her biological mother had died, but now she saw that wasn't true, and demanded an explanation. Why had Jaime abandoned her, and why hadn't she told her anything all this time? With tears in her eyes, Jaime begged for forgiveness. She never wanted to abandon her. She had thought Ihu had died after breaking off the relationship with her father under orders from the president. Jaime had been left alone, but miraculously she had given birth to Ihu. However, one day, a fire broke out in their home, and Jaime barely managed to escape, carrying her baby in her arms. But after waking up 2 days later, her parents told her that her baby had died. They even held a funeral. Jaime believed all this time that her child was gone, until on her mother's deathbed, she confessed that her baby was still alive. Jaime searched high and low and finally discovered that Ihul was her daughter. Ihul, shocked, wanted to know her real name and birthday. Jaime revealed that her name was Izihuan, and her birthday was May 24th. Jaime tearfully asked for forgiveness, but Ihu couldn't bring herself to forgive her. Honi had always told Ihu she was worthless, that no one ever wanted her, and that's why she was abandoned. Jaime kept apologizing, but Ihu cut her off, saying, "I don't care about having a mother right now, but I do care about revenge." She asked Jaime for her help. Meanwhile, Ihu's grandfather was looking after his son. He knew it was that woman Honi who had caused all the harm. Fortunately, his son was waking up, and as he did, he began to see the truth. Honi was nothing but a sinister woman who had manipulated him into mistreating his own daughter for so long. He told Ihu that she carried his blood, while Yura did not. He even revealed that Ihu was the daughter of Hoan, or, as she is now known, Haimi. He regretted everything, but it was too late to change the past. A few weeks earlier, Jamie had come to see Unjan, Uhu's grandfather. She had returned as Uhu's biological mother and wanted to support her daughter. She asked him to help Uhu in every way possible, and she would do the same, as she was also a shareholder in the company. On the other side, Honi was contacting every shareholder in the company, scheming against the president, trying to get everyone on her side. Today, she crossed paths with Hyan, whom she knew as Jaime. After exchanging greetings, it was clear that Honi didn't recognize her, but soon, Hyan revealed the truth. She was the same woman Honi had tried to kill many years ago. Hyan remembered that, long ago, when she tried to seduce Ayu's father, he would call out a name in his sleep. Arwon. Intrigued, Honey decided to visit Arwon and discovered that she had a baby. When she realized the child belonged to the man she desired, Honey made up her mind to end their lives. She was the one who orchestrated the fire because she was already pregnant with... Above all, Jamie knew this thanks to Hyunji's secretary, who had revealed everything to her. Jamie warned that if Hyunji ever laid a hand on Yu, Yura wouldn't survive. Meanwhile, Yu was making plans with her grandfather and father. Her father, overwhelmed with shame, couldn't believe that the woman he had lived with for over 20 years had made him treat his own daughter so horribly. Now, Yu asked her father to allow both Hyunji and Yura to return home, as if everything were normal. For now, they would pretend to trust them, but behind the scenes, they would plan their next moves. However, Mr. Mang asked his son what he intended to do about Yura since she wasn't his biological daughter. But to this man, Yura was his daughter, and he felt responsible for his family. This not only upset Ihu, but also her father, who then suffered a heart attack. The next morning, Honi didn't know what to do. She couldn't abandon the plans she had been scheming for over 20 years, but she wanted to escape. Yet Yura refused to run away. She had her father, who, despite not being her biological parent, had cared for her for over 2 decades. So, she decided to return home, which eventually convinced Honi that she couldn't leave them behind. Later that day, they returned to the house. Yura acted as if nothing had happened, while Honi started apologizing, accusing the secretary of poisoning her and deceiving her. Honi's husband wanted to know why she had hidden the fact that Ihu was his real daughter, and she claimed she had only recently found out. He then asked about Yura, and Honi justified herself, saying Yura was indeed her daughter, and that she had DNA tests to prove it. The results showed compatibility, but at that moment Honi stated that due to her husband's current health, she would take charge of the retail company from now on. Meanwhile, Ihu stayed with her grandfather, who, fortunately, was feeling a little better. However, she needed to focus on her health. Although at this point, Ihu was content because her grandfather had already given her a position in his company. Meanwhile, Yura was on another date with Duke, who still didn't know that Yura wasn't the biological daughter of the Lee family. Everything seemed to be going well, and thanks to Yura, Duke now had a new plan to cause trouble for his younger brother. Later, Ihu returned home, and as usual Duhuk welcomed her warmly, even preparing a feast for her. They ate happily, and during the meal Hook mentioned that he was ready to return to his father's company and reclaim his position. When he worked there, his grandfather had wanted him to inherit the presidency, but Duke felt slighted, and many problems arose because of it. Duhuk distanced himself from the company, but upon learning that his brother Duke was misappropriating company funds, he decided to return and save his family's legacy. Ihuk promised to support him in every way she could. On the other hand, Ihu had something to share too. She had met her biological mother, Miss Jamie. She had always thought the worst of her mother, but now she finally knew who she was and how she ended up in the orphanage. Although she felt more at peace, she was also conflicted and unsure how to process it all. Dahuk comforted her, hugged her, and reassured her that he would always be there for her, supporting her through everything she needed. Just then, Yu received a message from Hyun informing her that her grandfather's health had worsened. She rushed to the hospital to see him and found out that he had suffered from several heart issues which were now catching up to him. Unfortunately, there was little hope for his recovery, and Yu desperately wished for her grandfather to pull through. In the midst of everything, Yu received a call from Yura, inviting her to lunch with her and Duke. Reluctantly, Yu ended up dining with this nest of vipers. As always, Yuke played the role of the sweet, calm gentleman, only making subtle, hurtful remarks that barely fazed Yu. During a toast, after drinking the wine, Yu suddenly felt unwell. It was clear that Yura had spiked her drink. Meanwhile, Dahuk was at a jewelry store looking to buy something beautiful for his wife. At that moment, Duke called him, informing him that Ihu had collapsed and was now in the hospital. Panicked, Dahuk rushed to the hospital, desperate to know how she was doing. Upon arriving, he saw Yura, who swore she had nothing to do with what happened. But Dahuk didn't believe her, suspecting foul play, until he could investigate further. Yura left, but not without vowing to get revenge for the humiliation she had just endured. She would make them pay for everything. Later, Duhuk confronted his brother Juk outside the hospital. Duhuk knew Juk was nothing but a fraud, responsible for all of this. He punched him several times, but Juk didn't seem to care. He stood up and walked away as if nothing had happened. This fool had been pretending to have a broken leg for a long time to make Duhuk look bad in front of everyone. However, he never had such an injury, and Duhuk had already discovered months ago that Juk had been faking his inability to walk properly. Today, Duke's deceit was exposed. He admitted that he hated Duhuk and their mother for taking everything that was rightfully his, and he would never forgive them. He vowed to fight to the bitter end. After the confrontation, Duhuk rushed back to see Ihu. Thankfully, he had arrived just in time. The doctors had performed a gastric lavage after Ihu had suffered from an overdose of medication, which everyone knew Duke had caused. Duhuk no longer wanted to return to his father's company. He feared for Ihu's safety, knowing that Duke would come after her. But Ihu wasn't concerned. She assured him that she would take better care of herself from now on. But Duhuk knew he had to return and give his brother what he deserved. A little later, he began investigating the restaurant where his wife had fallen ill. It turned out that the waiter who had served them had quit, and it seemed everything had been carefully orchestrated. But Juk wouldn't get away with it. The time had come for Ju-hook to use the evidence he had, a recording in which Juk confessed that whether divorced or dead, he would find a way to get revenge on their poor mother. Days later, Yu visited her father to give him the wonderful news that he had fully recovered and could now walk without any impediment. Supposedly, the rehabilitation had worked, and this news thrilled her father. He decided to gather the entire family to share this good news, which played perfectly into Yu-hook's hands, as now Yu had nothing left to use against him. On another front, Yu finally arrived at retail, taking up her position as the head of the planning department. However, given her reputation, everyone spoke poorly of her behind her back. Not everything was bad, though. Yu reunited with Sumi, whom she had befriended at Do-hook's company, and they made a great team. But of course, Yu knew this territory was tightly controlled by Yura and her mother. The worst part was that Yu could no longer even enjoy a simple meal. After the incident with Duke, she had relapsed, longing to go home and eat the rice her husband made for her. Just as she was about to leave, Yura stopped her, asking her to accompany her to a company party. In the middle of this, Yura inquired about her health, which irritated Yu. She made it clear that, as Yura could see, she was fine. Yura swore she had nothing to do with what had happened, but Yu knew better. She believed Yura's thirst for revenge and desire to win over Do-hook could have driven her to do such things. Or worse. Perhaps Yura was being manipulated by Do. Yura responded, saying she didn't care. One way or another, she would marry Do-hook and ruin their marriage. In the midst of this, Do-hook asked Uhu if she had finished speaking. She replied yes, which shocked her, as she hadn't realized he had been listening to everything she said. After that, Uhu and Do-hook left, and he told her he came to see her because he missed her, and she missed him too. She had been thinking about him all this time. However, the real reason he had come was that Do-hook wanted to take Uhu to visit his grandfather, and so the weekend arrived. They visited Do-hook's adorable grandfather, but when they were alone, Do-hook played the recording of Yu's confession. His grandfather couldn't understand how his grandson had turned out this way. He felt pity for him, knowing his mother had died young, but he also realized that, given Do-hook's behavior, he had to make him pay for his sins before they grew any bigger. So, he urged Do-hook to join the family business, fight for it, and take charge. Days passed and the Seo family held a dinner where Ihu wasn't present. That evening, Kohu announced that his rehabilitation had finally been successful, bringing joy to everyone. But then he revealed something else. He shared that, a few days earlier, he, along with Yura, had invited Ihu for a meal, but the wine she drank was laced with medication, which forced them to take her to the emergency room. Donya believed Yura was probably the one behind it, and Kohu supported her suspicion. After all, it was Yura who had suggested the meal with Uyu to improve their supposed relationship, but no one had expected something like this to happen. Juk swore he would find the culprit, but, of course, Don-hook added that the one responsible had been hidden. Without hesitation, Don-hook blamed his brother, suspecting him as the real culprit, not Yura. Naturally, his brother, the saint, vehemently denied it, and the argument only fueled their father's fury. In that moment, Juk received a call. Someone had found the employee, and soon everyone would know who the real culprit was. A few days later, Siyu received a visit from Sujin at work, who was surprised by everything that had happened. Sujin informed her that the whole family knew about her poisoning, which puzzled Suyu. Why hadn't Donya come to visit her? Meanwhile, Yura arrived at the office with sandwiches, trying to buy favor with her co-workers, making them see her as a saint, while Yu only relied on her father's influence. In the midst of this, Donya arrived and immediately blamed Yura, declaring her guilty of poisoning Ihu during their lunch at the restaurant. She insisted that the employee had already confessed that Yura was the one responsible. Yura endured the harsh criticism from everyone, but then Yu walked out of her office with Sujin. Both were shocked to see Donya and rushed to stop her. Explaining that her outburst wasn't good for the company, Sujin urged Donna to calm down, and during this moment, Yura seized the opportunity to leave. Before doing so, she told Irhu, "I really didn't do anything. It was Juk who asked me to call you that day, and he arrived at the restaurant first." That night, Yura was fed up with Juk. She went to his house, waiting for him in her car. When he arrived, he clearly knew Yura was desperately seeking to marry him, but he had never intended to do so. However, amidst the humiliation, Yura couldn't take it anymore and revealed to him that she was pregnant with his child.